So supposing you want to know what time the moon's going to rise tonight. You know what its phase is, and you want to estimate when it's going to rise. Maybe you want to know if it's going to be bothering you when you're stargazing. Maybe you want to take pictures of it. Maybe you're going skinny dipping and you're hoping there'll be some moonlight. Well, we can approximately find this out with a very simple model. So let me walk you through this. Every time that we solve one of these problems, we're going to do it the same way. We're going to have the sun, we're going to have the earth, and the moon, if you know its phase, on the diagram. So there's the sun, there's the earth, and I put the moon if I know its phase. I am going to be looking down at the North Pole, so I'm going to put an arrow showing the rotation direction of the earth. Remember, the North Pole is right here. This is the earth. The moon's going around the earth the same way as the arrow, so I get a 2 for 1 with the arrow of the earth's rotation and the moon going around the earth. So our first question is, what time is a new moon overhead? I've got the sun, I've got the earth, now I'm going to draw the moon because I do know its phase, and it's a new moon, so it would be over here. When is it overhead? Well, it's overhead for somebody standing supposedly at the equator right here, and that position is noon. So we know what time a new moon is overhead. It's at noon. So let's try another question. So our new question is, what time is a first quarter moon overhead? Let's sketch the sun, the earth, and the moon if we know its phase. Yeah, we do. It's a first quarter moon. So there's our first quarter moon. What time is it overhead? I hope you're jumping ahead of me here and you're thinking to yourself, well, it's overhead for somebody right here. That's the sunset position. So it's overhead at 6 p.m. because that's the position there. It's overhead at sunset. Let's try our next question. All right, what time is a first quarter moon overhead? And notice you need to read the questions carefully. What time is a first So what time does a first quarter moon rise? Notice you read the question carefully to make sure that this is a rise or overhead question. What time does a first quarter moon rise? Well, the first quarter moon is right here, so to solve this question, we need to draw the sun, the moon, and the sun, the earth, and the moon if you know its phase. So we've got the sun and the earth, and we know it's a first quarter moon. We know it's overhead right here at sunset or 6 p.m. But the question is, what time does a first quarter moon rise? And it rises, well, there's two ways you can think of this. Let me tell you the easy way first. It's up for 12 hours a day, because just like the sun, in our little non-tilted Earth universe here, the sun is up for 12 hours a day, and it's down for 12 hours a day. Same thing for the moon, up for 12 hours. So that means if it's at its highest point, it must have risen half of 12 or 6 hours earlier. So the sun rose 6 hours before it was overhead. We figured out it's overhead at 6 p.m. and so we now can figure out that it had to be rising at noon. So 6 p.m. it's overhead. So it rose 6 hours before that. Well, I hope you can read that. So it rose 6 minus 6 equals 0. 0 o'clock, that would be noon. You can kind of see it on these diagrams. If it's overhead at 6 p.m., then around the corner here, this is where you can first see it as Earth is rotating. But these pictures are not to scale, and it's not very convincing. So I prefer the subtract 6 hours to find out when it rose method. You want to know when it set? 6 hours after it's overhead. First quarter moon's overhead at 6 p.m., so guess what? Sets for somebody at midnight. Alright, so let's try the next question, see if we can work that one out same exact way. What time does a full moon rise? So see if you can sketch that one out. You might want to even pause the video. You've got the sun, You've got the Earth, and you put in the Moon if you know its phase, and you do know its phase. It's a full moon, so it's over here. So if you have now figured out that the full moon rises at midnight, oops, that's not quite right. Yes, indeed, it's overhead for somebody at midnight, but that's not when it rises. It rises 6 hours before midnight, so it has to rise at 6 p.m. You want to know when the full moon sets? It sets 6 hours after midnight. It sets at 6 a.m. All right, and that's the way it is on the average. It is accurate to say at any time that the full moon rises at sunset and it sets at sunrise. Here's a trickier one. If the moon is rising at 3 a.m., what is its phase? This is a good one to sit down and see if you can figure it out before I give away the answer. So here, let me go through it. You've got the sun, you've got the Earth, and the moon if you know its phase. Well, you know what? You don't know its phase, so you can't sketch the moon on your picture. But you know it's rising at 3 a.m. That's hard to draw where somebody is if it's rising. But wait a minute, overhead is easy. So let's convert this into an overhead problem. If the moon is rising at 3 a.m., when is the moon overhead? Well, it's going to be overhead 3 hours after it's rising. So it's going to be overhead at 9. Now, was that AM or PM? Well, it was rising at 3 a.m. 6 hours later. That's going to be 9 a.m. It helps me if I think of an analog clock, a non-digital clock, to see that. So it's going to be overhead at 9 a.m. All right, 9 a.m. on here is right here. Oh, the moon would have to be right here. I know what that phase is. That's one of the crescent moons. And in fact, that's on this waning side. So the answer must be a waning crescent. All right, you think you've got it now? Try this. What time does a waxing gibbous moon set? And you should give it a try yourself. But if you've already paused it, here's the answer. You draw the sun, the earth, and the moon if you know its phase. Ooh, we do know its phase. It's a waxing gibbous. So waxing's on this side. There's the gibbous position. I know when it's overhead, but when does it set? Well, it's overhead. Let's see, this is in between 6 p.m., midnight. That's got to be 9 p.m. right there. And it's going to set 6 hours after that. 9 p.m. plus 6 hours. So I got to think about 9. 3 hours later it's midnight. 3 hours later it's 3 in the morning. Oh, it's at 3 a.m. that waxing gibbous moon sets. So when does a waning crescent set? Where is the waning crescent? This is the waning side. This is a waning crescent. What time does that set? Well, of course, it's overhead in between 6 a.m. and noon, so it's overhead at 9 a.m. When does it set? 6 hours later. So count on our fingers, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Ooh, 15 military time. That would be 3 in the afternoon. So it sets at 3 p.m., 6 hours after it's overhead. And I've got, I think, one more of these to try. Let's see if you can do that one. If the moon is setting at midnight, what is its phase? Oops, I left another moon on here. Okay, it's setting at midnight. Setting at midnight. They didn't tell us the phase. So see if you can figure out how you're going to solve this. All right, convert it into an overhead problem because those are easy. It's setting at midnight. When is it overhead? Well, 6 hours before it sets. 6 hours before midnight, that's 6 p.m. So here it's 6 p.m. right here. Oops. 6 p.m. is right here. So where's the moon? Overhead at 6 p.m. Oh, so a moon that sets at midnight is a first quarter moon. So those are the examples I have to kind of work you through this. You should be able to take any phase of the moon and figure out when is it overhead, when does it rise, when does it set. And I don't mean make a table, I mean make your sketch, figure it out for that given situation. You can do it.